We are learning Brachos daf tests. We're starting with the top 10 teachings. The first one is the halachic ramifications of dawn versus sunrise. The Gemara talks in the bottom of Daf Ches Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Ditanya Rabbi Shema bar Yochai Omer Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai quotes his teacher Rabbi Akiva and says, Pa'amim sha'adam kora kriya Shema shtei pa'amim b'yom achas kodem hanetzachama va'achas la'achar hanetzachama v'yotza b'hen yidei chavaso achas shal yom va'achas shal layla. There are times that a person will read the Kriya Shema twice, once before sunrise and once after sunrise, and through those two readings, they will have fulfilled their obligation for the evening and morning Shema. The Gemara asks, Hagufa Kasha, that itself is a problem, a question. Amras Pamayim Shadam Kor Kriya Shema Shtei Pam B'Yom. You calling it the person reading the Shema twice during the day. You refer specifically to day, not night. Alma Kodma Netzachami Imamahu. That means you're considering the time before sunrise, meaning between dawn and sunrise. You're considering it day. But then you make reference to the fact that you could be technically fulfilling your obligation for the evening Shema. Alma Lailahu. That would imply that before the nates, before sunrise, it's still evening of the night before. The Gemara continues on Daf Tes Amud Aleph on top. Lo, Olam Yamamahu. You could say that really after dawn, at some point before sunrise, it's already considered the day. V'haidikar lo laila Diganu bahu shaita. It's technically day, but because there's some people who are going to sleep really late, perhaps like musicians getting back from a wedding, and technically since they're going to sleep, you could call it evening to read the evening Shema as well. So that's what the Gemara says, and this is part of a very interesting conversation of what is the halacha when it comes to dawn. What's the halacha when it's clearly dark? There's only those who are looking at the horizon can see that there's a little tiny bit of light coming off of what will eventually become sunrise in quite a while. But what happens between dawn and sunrise? We're going to have a little bit more of a conversation in the shir today when we get to the Mishnah on Tes Amud Beis on the other side of the page. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you again to a beautiful teaching of Rabbi Joseph Bar Soloveitchik in Rishimas Shiurim from Rabbi Herschel Reichman of Yeshiva University, a dear friend and a teacher. So the Rabbi Soloveitchik suggests the following in classic kind of brisker terminology. And this is based in large part on the Gemara and Megillah. Perhaps, he says, we could say that halachically we could define two stages in what we call day. Let's just first, before I say his terminology, let me first use kind of what the issues might be at dawn. Most people wake up and look outside and it's still dark. I mean, I live in Manhattan. I'm assuming, and where I live, in my bedroom, if I look outside and it's dawn, it looks like night to me, okay? Now, even if I go into the other room, I face this direction, that's the Henry Hudson Parkway and the Hudson River, and New Jersey across the street from that. That is, what is that? That's west, right? So the sun sets in the west, which means there's no way I could see dawn. The other side of my building faces a courtyard or another building. It doesn't, there's no way I can know that it's dawn. Most people won't know that it's dawn. You could technically be in a place where you could see dawn, but the majority of people can't see dawn. So in theory, what it could be is dawn is this time where it might be day, but it doesn't look like day. It looks like night. So that creates this kind of quasi-day where it is technically day. And now I'll use the terminology that Rabbi Soloveitchik uses, which is as follows. It's chefza shel yom, which means it is objectively it's day, meaning the dawn has broken. There's a verse that in the 20th page in Megillah they quote to say that I think it was when they were constructing the second temple, and it said they would stand guard there all night with their weapons to make sure that the enemies didn't come and try to destroy the work that they had done in the temple. And from dawn until Seta Kochavim, until the stars came out, they would be working all day. So we see that they would refer to dawn as day, and that would be the start of day. So the technical chefza shel yom would start at dawn. However, there's a second category which Rabbi Soloveitchik terms the time of day, which in the way I'm explaining it is more connected to the awareness that people know that it's day. What the popular people refer to as daytime. We refer to daytime when it's already lit, which could either mean sunrise, where it's pretty clear it's day, or if not sunrise, something very close to sunrise, where it's lit up already. The day already has started in terms of light, even if you haven't actually seen the sun. So that's a distinction. In brisker terminology, the chefza shel yom versus the zmano shel yom, the technical objective day versus what we know as day or refer to as daytime. So he makes that distinction, and he resolves a lot of questions by making that distinction. So in practical terms, what the Gemara here is saying, and lahalacha, what we say is that it's an interesting period. This period between dawn and sunrise, because in theory at that time you could do two things that seem to contradict one another. In theory, you can daven Mariv if you, for example, were at a wedding. I used to go to weddings when I was a rabbi in Florida. They would serve breakfast at the wedding. If, let's say, you were, osek b'mitzvah, you were officiating at the wedding, and at the time when other people were davening Mariv, you had an emergency that needed to attend to. And then you, I guess, forgot during the course of you just said you'll daven later. And then at the end of the wedding, it's 5 a.m. It's not yet daybreak. It's not yet sunrise. Would you be able to daven Mariv? And the answer, according to the way most authorities understand it, according to the way it's paskin in the Ramah, would be yes. You wouldn't say hashkivenu. You wouldn't say. There's one thing you'd skip out on, because the Gemara says that. V'vad shlo yomar hashkivenu, at that time, after dawn, you couldn't say Hashkivenu. But the inference is, and most of the poskim read like this, is that you could do even the Birchas Kriya Shema, the blessings of the Shema, as well at that time. There does seem to be a dispute between Rashi and Tosfos here, and I'm not going to get into that now, but the bottom line is that even though it is day, we treat it for the most part like night, because, as Rabbi Soloveitchik points out, it doesn't look like daytime. We don't call it daytime because it's not a time that people are aware that it's day. Therefore, the Gemara will say we avoid doing many things unless it's an emergency. So the other way would be the way I just explained it to you would be the way. Would be one way of understanding it, that you could read the you could already read the evening Shema. Let's see what Rashi says here. Yeah, that's it. Rashi says Hakore Kriya Shema Shalayla. If you're reading the evening Shema, Shachris Samuch L'Amud HaShachar, in the morning around dawn, right before dawn. So Lo Yomer Hashkivenu She'ein Od Zman Tchila Shchiva El Zman Sov Shchiva. So he's learning that this statement of Kedai Reb Shimon, that you could be relying on Reb Shimon, is going on the, not what we just read and what I underlined, but what we did yesterday, the first Memra, the first statement in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Okay, so that's a Machlokas Rashi Tosfos. We're learning like Tosfos. Tosfos seems to make more sense to me here. What does he say? No, so he says, Venira li de az vadai zman shchivahu umatzi lememer hashkivenu. That when Rashi says, when it's before dawn, Rashi says it's before dawn. Tosfos takes issue with him and says, before dawn you could definitely say hashkivenu. It doesn't make sense, the placement of that statement according to Rashi. Upirish Asami Coetzee, he quotes one of the Balei Tosfos who was known as the Count of Coetzee. Very interesting personality. I used to read there was a novel when I was a kid called The Count of Coetzee. And I don't know how much of it was a historical novel, like a Feldheim type book. Anyway, the Koya Kodam, and that's the Salik Mine. So he explains, Tosfos explains in the name of Sar Coetzee that it's going on before Netzachama, L'chein Ka'amar D'Lomatz L'Memer Hashkivenu D'Lazman Shchivahi. It makes sense then, it's already after dawn, it's not a time going to sleep. But you can still say this Shema Kivin Sha'Allah Kvar Amud HaShachar Afilu Kodam Anetz. So again, but that would mean that there is a time that, as we mentioned, is technically Chafsa Shel Yom, and yet because there are people who still sleep at that period, right? Like I said, most people they get up in the morning. If I get up in the morning and it looks dark outside from my window, it looks pitch dark still, even if it's after dawn, I'm going to go back to sleep. I'm not going to say, oh, it's time to get up now. So because that's a reality in sleeping, so it still is Man Kriya Shema. Again, we follow the ruling of Rabbi Gamliel that says as long as generally people are asleep, you can still say the evening Shema. Okay, so that's a little bit about number one. There's a lot more on number one, but I'm going to go on to number two, which is this concept that you could rely on Rabbi Shimon in difficult circumstances. And I'm going to be specifically talking about majority versus minority in rabbinic disputes. Let's look at the Gemara. The Gemara says, we were learning that this statement is this statement that we were studying was based on Rabbi Shimon. So the Gemara says that I'm Rabbi Shua ben Levi, halacha Reb Shimon. The law follows like Reb Shimon, and then further he says a story. The way he said that law wasn't so much as a straightforward ruling, but a story again that happened with people who came back late from a wedding. But what it was is the ishtakru behilula. They were at a wedding, and I guess they were intoxicated. Devei Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Asla Kamei Rabbi Shua ben Levi. It was Rabbi Shua ben Levi's son that was getting married, and these fellows came to him to ask him the halachic question. They hadn't read the Shema yet. Amar Kadaihu Rabbi Shimon Lismech Alav B'Shas Chak. Rabbi Shua ben Levi answered these people that you can rely on Reb Shimon in extenuating circumstances. This quote actually comes across, if you look at the Mesoras Hashasi on the top inside of the daf, the Gemara, you'll see words that say Mesoras Hashas, and that's just quoting other sections where this, in this case, the statement Kedai Reb Shimon Holismach Alav B'Shas Chak. So you'll see it's a Gemara in Shabbos, in Erevin, and in Nida. There are other Gemaras that are talking about other circumstances where there's a debate between Rabbi Shimon and the sages, and we rule in accordance with the Rabbi Shimon if it's like an emergency. There's a debate about what's the underlying principle here. Usually we say Yachid v'Rabim halacha kerabim, which means when there's a debate between individual and the majority, we follow the majority, with certain exceptions. Is it that Rabbi Shimon is an exception? Specifically in there's like 4 or 5, maybe even more times that the Talmud actually says we follow Rabbi Shimon, specifically in extenuating circumstances? Or is there another element, which is, if you look at these debates, they seem, at least at face value, to be talking about rabbinic disputes. Even though reading the Shema in the evening is biblically prescribed, but in essence, since we rule like Rabbi Gamliel that you have all night, and there's an element of night already, even then, so then it's really about a rabbinic dispute, and the other cases are also rabbinic disputes, and that's how the Shach, the Sifsei Cohen, the commentator on the Shulchan Aruch, learns is that this principle of Rabbi Shimon being that we can follow him in these debates have in common that it's rabbinic disputes. The Taz, on the other hand, let me just see these notes. I heard this from Rabbi Schachter. The Taz says no, that even by biblical disputes we can rely on this principle of Kedai Reb Shimon Lismach Alav B'Shas Chak, and I think he specifically talks about Chadash, which has to do with grain, new grain before a certain time. There's a whole debate about whether you can eat it in Chutz La'aretz, and I believe part of the leniency that the Taz employs is based on this concept of Kedai Reb Shimon Lismach Alav B'Shas Chak. Again, the Shach doesn't agree with that. So that's an interesting question. In general, when you have the halachic conversation, something to be aware of is all of the principles are always operating not in a clear-cut thing where there's only one principle to be aware of. There's usually multiple principles that you have to be aware of at the same time to come up with the final halachic verdict. So, for example, here we're talking about 2 principles. One is the principle of Yachid v'Rabim, which is majority rule, and then the second principle, which is when it comes to rabbinic disputations, we could go with a lenient opinion. That doesn't mean we always go with a lenient opinion in a rabbinic disputation. There are often times where we don't follow the lenient opinion. But within certain framework, if the lenient opinion is a heavy hitter, so to speak, and it's a rabbinic ruling to begin with, and the rabbis find that we can rely on that opinion, so then we will overlook the general principle of Yachid v'Rabim, Halacha k'Rabim, a majority and a minority, we follow the majority. So again, this is one example of many, and the people who study Gemara and Halacha with the intention of kind of trying to formulate principles to figure out who the Halacha follows, this is a big part of what they spend a lot of their time doing. Okay, let's go on to number 3. Midnight at the Seder. Cinderella. What happens at midnight at the Seder? So the Gemara goes on and talks and says like this. So debate in the Gemara. What's the debate? It's between Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva. And the reason why we're even bringing this up, it seems like we're doing a page that has to do more with Passover than Brachot, is because the Mishnah, if you meant, just to bring back the context, the Mishnah said earlier on the first Mishnah of Brachot, in quoting Rabbi Gamliel, Kol mashu amru chachamim ad chatzos mitzvasan ad sheyaleh amud hashachar. Whenever the rabbi said, do the mitzvah by midnight, really you have till dawn, and then it brings examples, hekter chalafim ve'evarim mitzvasan ad sheyaleh amud hashachar, of mitzvahs that were performed at night that could be done through dawn. Karbanot that could be eaten for a day, could be eaten also through till dawn, not through dawn. Why do the rabbis in certain circumstances then say till midnight? In order to keep people away from sinning. So the question the Gemara asks is, why don't we mention this thing about Karban Pesach, right? Because the Gemara says, we didn't mention the eating of the Pesach offering. And the Gemara says, it brings a thing that you could eat Pesach till dawn. So the Gemara answers is that, that's one opinion, but in fact there's a dispute about if you could have the Pesach offering till dawn or till midnight. Who are the disputants? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who says it can be only through midnight, and Rabbi Akiva, who says it could be till dawn. At Tanya, as it was taught in the Brisa, Basra b'layla hazeh, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Nemar kan b'layla hazeh, v'nemar lahalan v'avarti b'eretz Mitzrayim b'layla hazeh. We make Gzera Shava. We look at the word Laila Hazeh, this night, and we juxtapose it to another time where God says, to Moses to tell to Pharaoh, I will pass through on this night and strike down the firstborn of Egypt. Now, Ma'alahalan al Chatzos, there the striking down is going to be by midnight. Afkan al Chatzos. So too, by juxtaposing these words as Gzera Shava, we understand by this rabbinic methodology of interpretation that the Pesach, the Seder, specifically the Karban Pesach, has to be eaten by midnight. Amalei Rabbi Kiva disagreed with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and he said, "V'alik farnema b'chi pazon," and he starts kind of arguing his point with another verse that seemingly contradicts the point of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and therefore he says, "Balai, you have all night till dawn." Now the Gemara goes through all of the different reasons in their bringing support for their arguments, and the question is, what is the halacha? Let's take a look and see what the Bir Halacha says here. Now, I don't. He says we have to look it up in Psachim. I guess I didn't do that. Okay, so forget that. I'll just have to do it without looking at a sefer. Basically, the halacha is, a lot of opinions say, in the name of, I think maybe either the Balei Tosos. I don't want to say it b'shem omro because I don't know who it is that says it, but the Rishonim say that one should try to finish their Seder by midnight, at least not the spoken word of the Seder, but at least the Afikomen. And that's what most religious Jews try to do. Some people are more careful to do that the first night than the second night. Other people try to do it both nights. Most opinions say you could continue the final reading of the Hallel even after midnight of the Seder. Okay, with that we're going to go to number. There's a Avnei Nezer that's interesting that says what you could do is, let's say you're in middle of, you just started eating your gefilte fish and it's about to be midnight, and there's no way you can really finish the Seder properly and eat the actual afikomen now. You're just sitting down for the first course. What you could do is you could eat matzah on condition and say, if the law follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, this will be your afikomen, and if the law follows the rabbis, it's just going to be part of your meal. And I don't have time to explain how that works, and if it works or not, but there are those, the Avnei Nezer is somebody that a lot of people rely on, and they do something like that. Other people don't really worry about it. My community, I grew up in a home that my father did keep an eye on the clock. Definitely always the first night, maybe not as carefully the second night. My current shul, they definitely did not try to finish by chatzos, but Reb Shlomo would refer to the Avnei Nezer. I don't know if he did it every year and told people about it, but he definitely was well aware of it. Okay, let us go on to number 4, which is very connected to this, which is a story from the Haggada, which at face value might seem to be at odds with our Gemara. What does this story say? The story is Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tav, and Rabbi Yosef ben Raft. It's a story with a bunch of sages. Included in those sages is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva, the two people arguing in our Gemara about when you have to finish the Karban Pesach by, and by inference, perhaps the matzah, the afikomen, which is in the place of the Karban Pesach. And what does it say? They were gathered in the city of Bnei Brak. They were recounting the Exodus all night. They were going on and on until their students came to them and said, "Rabbis, the time for the morning Shema has come." What's the problem with that? The problem, it's not a strong question, because it says they were talking about the Exodus. It doesn't say they were eating the afikomen till morning. It says they were talking about the Exodus. But, usually that's part of the Seder. Now, one answer is actually there's two mitzvot. One mitzvah is the Seder, and the other mitzvah is recounting the Exodus that continues all night. And that could be an explanation of why Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah could partake with Rabbi Akiva in his Seder. He already finished his afikomen, but the second mitzvah of recounting the Exodus continues throughout the night. Another answer could possibly be, who was the Rav? Who was the local Orthodox rabbi? Well, Orthodox was not a thing yet. We didn't have that word till many years later. But who was the rabbi in that community? Rabbi Akiva, supposedly. So therefore, who, as a guest of the Mora de Astro, so to speak, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, would kind of fall into place, so to speak, and follow the ruling of Rabbi Akiva. Now, you wouldn't necessarily say that perhaps he had his afikomen earlier than Rabbi Akiva, but he wouldn't get up and leave because that's disrespectful. So those are two potential answers. There are other answers that it's not a contradiction at all because it only says they were talking, and therefore the question isn't really such a strong question. Okay, we're going to go on to number 5, which is redemption at night and redemption during the day. The Gemara continues in this conversation and tells us the following. If you look at the Chumash, the Torah tells us the following. It tells us, verse 41 of chapter 12 in Exodus, that it was at the end of the children being in the land of Israel for 430 years. It was the end of 430 years, and it was on that very day that all the legions of Hashem left the land of Egypt. Okay, that means day. Yet we read right before that and after that, the verse after that says, Leil Shimurim Hula Hashem. It's a night of being guarded for God. Lahotziam Eretz Mitzrayim. Hu alayla hazel Hashem Shimurim l'chobnei sol darosam. So the question is, which one is it? Is it day or is it night? And it seems to be a contradiction. There, the earlier it says, Vehi b'chatzi alayla Hashem hiku kol b'char be'eretz Mitzrayim. Right? It was at midnight when the plague of the firstborn started. And then it says that, Pharaoh is saying, please leave. And it seems like they start leaving. So the Gemara explains that it's not a contradiction, it's two redemptions. There's one redemption. The redemption of the night is when Pharaoh insisted that they leave, and the redemption of the day is when they actually left. And the Gemara already earlier discussed this concept of being somech geula l'tefila in Ma'ariv, which means bringing together the mention of redemption in the past and hopefully the future together with a prayer, not just as a thing that we do in the morning by Shachris, but also something we do by Ma'ariv in the evening. And part of the debate is they had some level of redemption because Pharaoh already said, okay, please, I'm begging you, please leave. And Moses is like, okay, but now we have to borrow nice things from you guys, which they took everything, right? So let's understand the psychology behind these two things. And perhaps you could say the redemption, there's two elements of this whole story, which is not just the time of day or the time of night. It's trickery versus straightforwardness, where you see that on the one hand, Moses is very strong with Pharaoh in certain ways. On the other hand, the whole time he's not telling him the whole truth. He's telling him, we're going for 3 days to worship our God in the desert. Now, what that means is that he's setting up, in a sense, Pharaoh to come chase after them when they don't return after 3 days. Why is that? Is it because Pharaoh would never have let them go if they just said we want to go free, or is there another reason? So perhaps the reason that we can say that there is that there's two ways of going free, and they're both important and they're both parallel ways. One is, for example, we all know that the idea of the Exodus from Egypt is something that is not just historically significant or significant in terms of our story of becoming a people that inspires us, but it's really to be understood as a daily occurrence that we always have Egypt in our own life. It could be an addiction, and that's Egypt. It's even though it isn't somebody else, it's an internal Egypt. It's an internal Pharaoh. It's your addiction that seems to control you and take your own will away and make you want to do something that you wish you wouldn't want to do or have to do. So therefore, there's an idea that to get out of Egypt, you have to trick Pharaoh. Otherwise, if you tell Pharaoh your intentions, he won't let you go. Meaning, if you're even honest with yourself, the Yetzer Hara won't give up on you. It'll just ensnare you back again. So there are like hacks of how you can hack your Yetzer Hara in order to be able to kind of figure it out enough to get out of its grasp temporarily. And that's kind of what Moses had to do on the one hand. That's the Exodus at night. The Exodus during the day is that the goal is not just to have a hack to trick the Yetzer Hara or to fool Pharaoh or to lie to Pharaoh. It's to go out in broad daylight, to say, I am free. God set me free. I'm not under you. I don't fear you at all. And they're both elements of freedom that we have to use both tools, put both tools in your toolkit. And that's perhaps one of the meanings of having both truths in terms of redemption. We are now going to continue with number 6, which is, what does someone in jail want? Please, I beg of you, fulfill my promise to Abraham. The Gemara tells us on Tes Amud Beis. Gemara says, it's actually the bottom of Tes Amud Aleph. Gemara says the following. In the name of Rabbi Yanai. It says, Dabrina ba'aznei ha'am. Eina ela loshen bakasha. That term, na, is begging or asking very strongly. Amar le'o HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, God tells Moses, B'bakasha mimcha lech v'amar lahem liYisrael, b'bakasha mikem, shalu mitzrayim kli chesed kli zav. He's asking Moses, please beg the Jewish people to ask the Egyptians for their gold and silver vessels. Shelo Yomar Oso Tzaddik, that righteous one, Abraham, should not say Ve'avdim ve'inu osam kiyum behem. The what he experienced in a prophecy regarding his descendants, that God would enslave them and afflict them, that God did. But the promise that they would leave afterwards with great wealth, lo kiyum behem, he didn't do. Amrulo levai shenetzi ba'atzmeinu. The Jews were saying, what are you talking about? We just want to get out. Imagine an example. This would be somebody sitting in jail. Jail is not a pretty place to be. His lawyers come to him and say, we have good news. This case is going well. We're going to get you out of here very soon. And not only that, the whole conviction is being overturned, and there's a lawsuit against the government, and we're going to win money, and you're going to get out of here, and you're going to have money in your pocket. You're going to be a wealthy man. What does he tell the lawyer? Do me a favor, guys. Just get me out of here. I don't need you to settle the lawsuit now. Like, I'm not worried about money. I'm worried about existing. I can't survive here another day. Just get me out. Get me out of here. So in that sense, the Jewish people were saying, what do we need to stay a little longer to get things? We just want to get out of here. So in a sense, they were doing Moses, who was doing God, a favor to fulfill the promise to Abraham to get stuff. The Hasidic and Kabbalistic commentaries explain that it's not just going on physical gifts, it's going on. They had to extract sparks of holiness from Egypt and they were almost done, but to finish the extraction, they had to stay just exactly to the time, to the 15th of Nisan, and get out, and then they would have fulfilled the promise of spiritual gifts of great wealth. That is number 6. Number 7 is Moses teaching God a lesson, and this has to do with, if you look in the Torah says, God appears to Moses in the burning bush. Remember that story? And Moses says, to God, Moses says in verse 14 of chapter 3 of Exodus, in verse 13 he says, the end of the verse he says, if they ask me what's your name when I go to the people of Israel to ask them to I'm going to redeem them, free them, and they ask me for your name, what should I tell them? It's translated here. God answers Moses, I shall be as I shall be. And he said, so shall you say to the children of Israel, I shall be has sent me to you. Whoa. That's, some people say that's actually a name of God. So, that's why I read the whole verse. But I shall be who I shall be. So comes the Gemara and says the following. The Gemara says the following thing, and Brachot. Amar leha HaKadosh Baruch, I will be who I will be. Amar leha HaKadosh Baruch leMoshe, Lech, Amar lehem leYisrael, Ani yisi imachem b'shivud zev, Ani yiyeh imachem b'shivud malchiot. It's not just a name of God. It has a specific meaning. All the names of God relate to something God does to us. That's how the Kabbalists explain the names of God are not his essence, they're all in relationship to us. And this particular name is God saying, I will be with you. I am with you in this exile, and I will be with you in the future exiles. Amar lefanav Rabbanu Shalom. Moses responds and says, Master of the world, it's enough to have this hardship now. Meaning, please don't bring up other future exiles. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lech emar lehem ehyeh sholachani aleichem. God says, you're right, Moses. Go and tell them I will be, meaning I am with you now. That's who you should say is sending you. Which means, on some level, that, and this happens all the time in the Torah, Moses says, God says something, and Moses kind of teaches God the better way to relate to people. Fascinating, right? Like this whole idea that Moses is like teaching God stuff. I mean, you think God is the teacher and Moses is the student. That's usually how we think of it. Moshe is the Eved Neman. He's the trusted servant. He is the prophet. He is the lawgiver of God's law. But the idea that Moses influences God, that's a very basic idea, not just in Zohar, but also in the Gemara and also in the Torah itself and the Chumash itself. That the question is why? The question is, if God is all-knowing and infinite, why is there even stuff that a human being can be like kind of teaching God? I have an answer, but it's more Alpi Zohar. It's more according to the Zohar. But the root of the answer is a concept that's brought down in the Ramban and other sources in the Zohar, which is all the names, all the words in the Torah are all actually names of God. And all the names of God are all communicating with one another. So Moses himself is an aspect of the divine, and he's able to actually interface with other aspects of the divine to influence them. And that's a principle that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gozer, that God will make a decree, and then a tzaddik will undo the decree. That means that there's a kind of reciprocity between Moses and God, that Moses actually does change the aspect of God that's in conversation and dialogue with Moses, because Moses is sometimes, I don't want to say this, but equal, maybe even higher on the hierarchy of the kind of sfirot. I don't want to freak anyone out who's never studied any Kabbalah, so that's why I want to keep away from this. Let's continue with number 8. When to read the morning Shema. Okay, it's getting late. I already read the morning Shema, but it's still getting late, and I got to get to work. So I'm going to just do this quickly. The Gemara says, Me'ei Masai Korin es Shema b'Shachas. When do we read the Shema in the morning? And the Gemara says, Mishiyakir ben Chelas Lavan. When you could tell the difference between Chelas, which is that type of blue fringe. The Gemara will ultimately say it's talking about tzitzis, and a white fringe. There are other opinions. Rabbi Eliezer Omer ben Chelas Lekarti, between one type of blue and like a leek green color, and V'gomra ad hanei tzachama, and you complete the Shema. In other words, it's it's sometime between dawn and sunrise, and you complete it at sunrise. Rabbi Yoshua Omer ad shalosh shos, shekain derech melachim lama b'shalosh shos. Rabbi Yoshua says you have till 3 hours of the day, because the kings would get up in the 3rd hour. So therefore, you don't have to read it right away, but you read it relatively in the morning. The Gemara discusses other opinions in terms of like what's day enough, how much light is there, and the halacha is that if you see somebody, an acquaintance, not a good friend, not somebody you don't know at all, but you see them from about 5, 6, 7 feet away, and you can tell who they are, that's already enough day for you to read the Shema. But then the Gemara says, Amar Abaya, L'tfilin ka'acher. In regards to putting on tefillin, we follow that opinion that says when you could see your friend, that you don't know well, from 4 amos away. L'kriya Shema k'vasikin. Like Kriya Shema, we introduce what's probably a third opinion, which is vasikin. What is that? The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, vasikin hayu gomen oso im hanetzachama. Kadeshi, I'm skipping a little bit. Kadeshi yismoch geula l'tfila v'nimsim misbal b'yom. What does that mean? That means the following, and again, I'm going to do it according to how the majority opinion reads this, although there is another way of reading it, which is right before the sun rises, you should be concluding the blessings that come after the Shema, and then you should do the Shemon Esrei at sunrise. And why is that of significance? Because there's a verse. What does the verse tell us? The verse says, yirou, it's a verse in Psalm 72, verse 5, Yirucha im Shemesh lefnei yareach dar darim, which means they shall fear you with the sun and before the moon for all generations. So that's talking about Shachris should be Shema as sunrise, as either the sun is about to rise, or the minority opinion says with sunrise, but we're going to go with the majority opinion that says just before sunrise, so that you could then do the prayer for the Shemon Esrei at sunrise. So that's the halacha, that's how we follow, except we don't really follow it. There's a contradiction. Here the Gemara says Abaya, who's a later authority, we usually follow Hilchos Basra, the later authorities, but later the Gemara will say the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua. Most people understand that the Abaya is saying this is the best way to do it, is to read the Shema right before daybreak and then read Shemon Esrei at daybreak. But of course, if you didn't, you can continue to read it for 3 hours of the day. So that's a little bit about number. There's a lot more to do, but I don't have time, so let's go quickly on to number 9 and 10. It's worth paying money to see the king. And the Gemara says, Whoever does this, and the way, at least according to the way Tosfos learns it, means if they do this in the morning, which, by the way, I don't do it, but when you do it, it feels great. It feels very special, which is going to be number 10. But, it's like you sync, you're in sync with the universe. Like it feels like your prayers and the physical world are just like kind of linked up, and it is a very powerful thing. So the rabbis say, if you do this, nothing bad will happen to you. One rabbi said, that's not true. I did it, and it was a terrible day for me. Why was it such a bad day? Because he was part of a delegation that had to go see the king. And what do you have to do to see the king? You have to bring gifts, and you have to bring tax addition. Like it's like today. If you want to go see a politician, you have to give a big donation. So he made a big donation, and he was out of a lot of cash, and he wasn't happy with how it went down in terms of. So he got to see the king. He didn't get anything from the king. He just saw the king. Great, okay, no, mazel tov. But was it worth it? He didn't think it was. So the Gemara says, no, that was a good day because you have to pay to see the king. It's worth paying to see the king. And the reason the Gemara gives is. Good to give money to the king, because Rabbi Yochanan said, "La'olam yishad adam laretz likros malchi Yisrael." Person should always run to greet a king of Israel. V'lo likros malchi Yisrael, but not just the king of Israel. El afilu likros malchi of the chacham mazalos. Even a king who's not of Israel, even if they're an idolater, she'im yiska yavkin min malchi Yisrael and malchi Akim. If you merit, you'll get to see the differences between the two of them. So the Gemara is giving a very interesting reading. It's interesting. I sometimes listen to these kind of YouTube videos of philosophers and anarchists and radicals. I don't know why, just to see what's, when people think that the Torah is crazy, I say, well, what about these people? So the other night I was listening, probably falling asleep between a debate with Michel Foucault and Noam Chomsky. Anyway, Michel Foucault, he's a postmodernist, and he's, Chomsky is going on and on about his Marxist, stuff, that he's a brilliant, twisted soul, that guy. I think he's fantastically able to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge in his stuff. It's pure BS and pure joy to listen to at the same time. And Foucault is kind of calling him out on something where he's saying, you're like, even the Marxist version of what the goal is for, like, what people need to have in their life is a bourgeois conception. And his whole thing, Foucault's whole thing, is like, what we think is right and wrong is based on a faulty misconception of whoever's telling you what it is, the advertisers, the thought makers. And he was kind of knocking any kind of like certainty that Chomsky was trying to like say what we need to do. And Chomsky was saying, well, we can't just be indifferent and do nothing. Okay, it was an interesting conversation. The point I wanted to make here is power ultimately power? Like, if the king of Israel is a king, is he just really going to be like any other king, but with the Star of David instead of something else? And I think the Gemara is asking that question. It means, on a simple level, it means if you merit, you'll see the difference, meaning you'll see Mashiach coming. But on a deeper level, it means if you merit, meaning if the king of Israel merits, we'll see that there is really a difference. It's not just the same thing with a Magen David. So that's my number 9. And number 10 is a story, unbelievable story. This is a great ending for today's top 10 for Daf Tes on Brachos. The Gemara says, Amar le Rabbi Ilah le'ula ki aliyas lahasam shal b'shloma. When you go up there, ask about the welfare of my brother, Der Brunia Achi, in front of everyone. The Adam Gadol v'Sameach b'mitzvos. He's a great person. He rejoices in mitzvos. What's the story? Zimna Chada Samach Kulu L'Tfila V'Lo Pasuk Chucha Mipuma Kulayama. One time, he was Samech Kula L'Tfila. He brought these two things together, and he didn't stop laughing or smiling, depending on how you translate the word Chucha, all day. The Reb Tzadok, who is a great follower of the Mei Shilach, although he was a Litvak for most of his, for a lot of his life, and this is one of his more Litvish Torahs, says the Chiddush is that when you're Somech Gula L'Tfila, when you bring these two things together, that it's on the level of Az Yamales Chok Pinu. That us means then when Mashiach will come, our mouths will be filled with laughter. According to Reb Tzadok, even in a mitzvah that we do today, it makes us happy, but not like outrageously happy, unless the mitzvah is somehow connected to Yemos HaMashiach, unless it brings us into the future. I don't necessarily agree with Reb Tzadok on this. It's his own creative reading. But the fact is that this is a mitzvah that's off the charts, meaning he didn't, to me, just the simple reading of this is that you usually laugh when you're happy, but to keep laughing all day, imagine the joy that he had. It has to be something very intense. I bless you and me that we should be zocheh one time in our life at least to do a mitzvah that makes us so happy. Thank you.